Plugin of the week is the Kush Audio Clariphonic Parallel EQ. This Clariphonic EQ is an actual hardware piece, and this is an emulation of the same by the same company who created it. So I'm just going to zoom in here for a second, take a look at it. Essentially, it's a parallel EQ. So what does that mean? Parallel EQs are not new. The concept of parallel EQs goes all the way back to passive equalizers. And in passive equalizer circuits, although this is not described as a parallel equalizer, it's an active equalizer from everything that I can tell. Or it doesn't give those details, so I'm not clear exactly about that. But essentially what happens is if you imagine taking the signal that's coming in and you mult it, so say it exists, now you have 3 copies of it. And on the second copy, let's say that you filter off all the low frequencies up to 2K. And now you add a little bit of extra gain at the output stage. So now when you have the cumulative effect of all of those 3 split and then added back together, and you would have the effect of having more high frequency above 2K than you had before. And this is something that conceptually, while it sounds like, well, why not just add gain to those particular frequency areas just to the direct signal? And that is more what an active EQ does. In parallel, however, you can still have it be active, because if you split the circuit out, you can still have an active gain stage, and it can actually keep or preserve, unlike passive EQs that actually work with filters, high-pass, low-pass type filters, or band-pass filters, to work within specific frequency areas. And I'm not exactly sure how this is done on this EQ. What you can end up with is the cumulative effect of adding in like a parallel chain is kind of the way it's described in the manual. You can have more high frequency response. And what it does is it adds like a smoothness that is, and a character that is very cool, especially for like mastering work, but it also works really well in mixing situations. And so the hardware unit is an actual mastering quality EQ. And it just focuses on high end. Basically, we're not dealing with anything here. The lowest frequency setting, which we'll go through, goes down to 800 hertz, but most of this stuff happens on the real top end. So what we have here on the basic is that it can be operated in dual mono, stereo, mid-side, which is really great. And you have a bypass control, which just triggers the bypass up there. And then you have stored settings that you can put in. You can load settings, overwrite a default if you have a default setting you want to keep, or save as, etc. So that way you can store your own presets if you have particular settings that you like. On the actual hardware unit, there is a piece in the center that allows you to listen to just the direct signal or to just the process signal. And there are 2 channels here. So it's a 2-band EQ, focus, and a clarity. And they're primarily, although not totally, kind of shelving EQ type of thing. So what you have here on the focus channel is you have 2 filters that kind of work together here. And so the first one is a lift, and what it does is it boosts on the low end down to about 800 hertz. And on the open side, that shifts up to 3K. So this is going to give you a little bit more grit in the mid-range, a little bit more focus in the mid-range, and this is going to give you a little more presence, working a little bit more in the higher mid-frequencies. So this gives you a little bit more of an edge. So you have a setup here. When you work with tight or diffuse, essentially what the diffuse setting is like a shelving pattern, whereas when you put the tight pattern, it puts a bell on the top, or it kind of closes off the top around 14K or so, and you have a soft filter in the top end. So it's not turning into a bell curve, but it's kind of tightening up the top end. And then you have an amount here, so this allows you to kind of focus in. And so we're going to put up some different instruments, and I'll kind of show you how you can use this. So this is one, and the 2 switches kind of work here, or sets of switches here, work kind of in conjunction with each other. And there's also an out setting, essentially what this does is it takes that whole circuit out. So you can see here, if I'm in lift and I flip it to out, it takes that whole thing out of the circuit. So you can lift that out. You have a gain control right here, which you can crank up. Down here, the next section is the clarity section. So this is the second filter. So in a way, what you can have here is it's a gain-only thing. It's an additive EQ only. So there's no subtractive side of this EQ. And when you hear it, it adds like a really beautiful sheen and clarity, especially on the top. But what you have here is sort of stair-stepped shelving EQs. So this is working down on the lower side, 803K. But when you kind of work your way up here, the presence frequency here is 4K. The sheen works its way up to 8K. If you work your way over to the shimmer setting, then what you're getting is 18K. And then you go up to 34K if you go to silk. So what you're doing is you're kind of stepping your way up to higher frequencies. Now, when you work with this, you'll notice that there is a switch which goes back and forth between the two. So in its center setting, it's out, right? So you can put both circuits out if you like and use just one of them, okay? And you're either selecting from one of 4 frequency settings, excuse me. So if you flip over to the left, you're getting the presence frequency, the sheen frequency, the shimmer frequency, or the silk frequency. And we'll kind of work with that with some different things. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep this in stereo. I'm going to put this on, I got this on some stems, and I have 4 of them here. So we're going to kind of work, and I'm going to start here with just a little bit of drums on this. And let me zoom out for a second, kind of bring over my memory locations, zoom back in here, and then let's just kind of start from a place where we can hear some drums. And let's see. So if I start here with the focus frequency, I'm going to start with a diffuse setting here. So that brings out some body, particularly hear it in the snare. Not low end body, kind of mid-range focus. And this works more towards the bite of the snare, higher up at 3K. So you really see how that brings out the attack on the kick and the snare. And that shifts it a little lower. And now let's listen to the difference of this with the tight. Now, mind you, because this is a parallel EQ, it's not taking away any high frequencies from the original signal. So that filter on the top end is additive, and this is something that would be different, where if you just did a shelving EQ and then you shelved up the top end, you would be killing that, as opposed to, so it makes it, gives you more control. Essentially, I guess you would be going to like a bell curve in terms of an active EQ across the circuit, but the parallel equalizer gives you a different characteristic sound. And I really like the way that sounds there with the tight setting and the lift kind of pulling down around 800 hertz. It really focuses the kick and the snare in particular without making them too clicky. And you don't really need a ton. And I'm going to leave that for that, and I'm going to work and move over to the guitar tracks here, and then we'll focus on probably on a similar area with the focus, and then we'll save some of the air frequencies for the vocal tracks. So here, if I now bring in some of the guitars, I could probably do a similar type of thing. Where you hear that gives an edge or an air. And that's working at 3K, which could be a little aggressive. So I'm going to go back to the lift, give it a little more mid-range focus. So let's zoom out and hear those guys in and out together. What I really love about it is how musical it is. Like, it's sometimes when working with things like tilt shelves and stuff like that, there will be a tendency for them to start to get bring out a harshness. And especially when you're getting down into that 3, 4, 8K range, it could really sometimes get nasty to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, it's giving me this presence, but it's giving me something else or a characteristic that I also don't like. And so the way that this does it is pretty amazing, and one of the things I love the most. So let's actually, I'm going to solo up the vocals here and kind of swing into this. Sorry, here. Let me just kind of refocus myself here and come into the verse, and let's let's work on the top end. And we'll start here. And let's work with the presence frequency. This is working 4K up.
The things that made me laugh, now they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes.
Nice focus there. I think what I want to do here is work with this on the open setting, and work with it. Let's see if this on the tight setting here. So I'm going to take this out for a second, and then.
Do you know how many people own your car?
Because I like that presence that's in there.
Every time I see it, I wonder where you are.
And it also keeps it up above what the boost that I did on the drums and on the guitars. And then I'm gonna tack on top of that. So that 4K actually sounds really cool, but I'm gonna go with this here, and then let's shift up to 8K on this side and add a little bit in, and let's just see what happens there.
Do you know how many people own your car? Every time I see it, I wonder where you are. The things that made me laugh, now they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes.
It's really beautiful sounding for an 8K boost. It's usually an area I kind of have a tendency to avoid. I'm usually shifting my EQ for a boost much higher than that. So to get something that's down that low, that works in an important area without sounding harsh, is pretty amazing. Let's go over to shift up to the much higher frequency. So we're going to go up to 18K here and listen to what's called Shimmer here.
Do you know how many people own your car? Every time I see it, I wonder where you are.
So it's like lifting a blanket right off of the vocal sound.
Now they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes.
And also, what's really cool is that it's not losing any of the more, because this is going up to 34K, right? So this is pretty high.
Do you know how many people own your car?
So we really could crank a lot here.
Every time I see it, I wonder where you are. The things that made me laugh, now they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes.
So listen to this in the track, and let's just kind of see which of these kind of works the best here, and see what we can do.
Do you know how many people own your car? Every time I see it, I wonder where you are. The things that made me laugh, now they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes. So I keep looking around with my eyes on the ground, trying to find the confidence I know I've dropped. I keep retracing my steps, going through the events, trying to find out.
You can see how that gets harsh a bit there, because it's kind of stacking on top of the 3K filter there. So one of these two, I kind of like the Shimmer here. The Silk maybe makes this particular vocal, because of the style of music, a little bit too thin. On the right style of music, that air would be really beautiful. And that actually, I'm boosting a lot, because in order to get it down to the point where you hear it, you're going to have to turn up quite a bit to kind of get the back end of the shelf to sweep down low enough into the audible range to bring that up, so to a point where you can hear it. But also an amazing thing that's Silk on the mastering side of things.
Do you know how many people own your car? Every time I see it, I wonder where you are. The things that made me laugh now, they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes. So I keep looking around with my eyes on the ground, trying to find the confidence I know I've dropped. I keep retracing my steps, going through the events, trying to find out when the love stopped. And just like an assassin, in the heat of the moment, got my hand on the trigger, I'm ready to go. Watching your every move, every step, everything that you do.
So this is on the stem, so I have my full mixes kind of coming into here, and you could hear how it really adds this beautiful finished kind of shine onto everything. Really, really cool, and this is one I've fallen in love with very quickly in terms of a plugin, because it's somewhat, I've found it, believe it or not, hard to find that EQ that does the top end so smoothly and in such a unharsh way, and this one is really nailed it. So I really dig this. This is the Kush audio plugin Clariphonc parallel equalizer. This is actually an emulation of a hardware piece that's widely used in mastering and recording studios, and really great emulation. A nice one to have in your plugin collection, especially for mastering work, but also, as you can see here, for mixing work. And great, that top end, especially for vocals on the individual tracks or on the stems, the way I have it here on the mix bus. Nice finisher. Really, really great one. There you have it. It's a plugin of the week. That's Clariphonc Parallel EQ by Kush.